and welcome to another SundownSurmisings. I'm PJ along with Deb. Good evening. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. It's March, and we are almost wrapped around. I think I put it in the news before. I think our first broadcast was like April 12 or something like that. So we're within a month of having a whole year under our belt, and that's just crazy.
It's interesting, when we started this, we really bought it for our own sanity.
Yeah.
Just trying to do something to break the monotony.
And considering there might be only 3 people watching, it might still be just for our
That may be, but we wanted to do something that would kind of break through.
Yeah.
That COVID was so much around, it was new for us back then.
Yeah.
But that we wanted to, bring in God.
Yeah.
Where's God in these moments? And through the course of the year, it's really fun to go back sometime and watch how He's brought this.
Oh yeah. No, I still think it's amazing content. I just go back and look at something like, oh man, I knew so little about video and the ones originally, they're so much better, But anyway, but you kind of live and learn. I was just looking at we're the same kind of blue shirt.
Oh, we are. That's right.
I didn't get the dress up no more. Casual today. But anyway,
that's one of the fun things that's made it really fun for us, is because we have an opportunity to have these casual conversations and to have these moments where we just kind of we break open the books, and the stories of Jesus, and just dive into them, and we don't always have a direction or exactly.
No, this is what I'm March through.
Yeah.
In fact, I had one different idea for the story tonight, which is going to be in John, my favorite book again. We're going to start at the beginning of John. We're going to end at the end of John. I discovered something completely new that I've never really noticed before. That's the cool thing about this book. It's like it keeps rewriting itself. So we're going to be in John chapter 1 to start. I'm going to have PJ read John 1 verse 42, and then we'll read John 21, 15 to 18. And then I'm going to kind of rewind and give you a little bit of background between the names I want to point out. And then I want to read it again and see if you notice something very interesting that I had not noticed before.
So as I turn to John 1, can you remind, for maybe something that's new tonight who's visiting us, what our subject is?
Okay, good. Well, we're looking at new starts. If you look at the picture that went by, and I'll put it again, the theme that we're doing, new starts. Times in Scripture where people had an encounter with God, and something snapped or changed or opened their eyes or whatever, moving in a new direction. So we're going to look at John chapter 1, 42, and I think you have the New King James, right?
No, I have the NIV.
Oh, the NIV, sorry.
Oh, no, the CSB.
Oh,
Christian Standard.
Okay. And
you have
I have the King James, and I'll put the NIV down below. So somewhere in there, you're going to find something. All right, here we go.
All right, so John 1, verse 42. And he brought Simon to Jesus. And when Jesus saw him, he said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called," and I'm going to say this wrong so you can correct us, Cephas, which is translated Peter.
Yes.
Now, you taught me something new.
Yes. When looking this up, there's a couple things that are interesting. So, I pronounced it Cephas like all my life. Thought that's what it was.
And I did Cephas.
And I saw, and some of you may have seen as well, the movie Passion of the Christ, and I've shown it in my classroom. And they use only the Aramaic and stuff, and some Latin in there. They use the original languages that would have been at the time, and they pronounce it Kephas. And I was like, for some reason, I was like, okay, whatever. But digging through it, looking at the Greek pronunciation, it is Kephas. The E is what we would call a long E sound, and the Greeks, they have an S and a K sound. They didn't have a C, because really C in English it doesn't have its own sound. It's in the King James, and yours said, which is by interpretation what?
You are Simon, son of John, and be called Cephas, which is translated Peter.
Now, they do a translation there, and that's fascinating because that's not how King James puts it, and that's also not how Thayer's listed lexicon, and it's not how Strong's Concordance listed.
Okay.
It's the King James reads like this: "Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah, thou shalt be called Kephas," which is by interpretation a stone. And the reason they leave it that way is because, and this is interesting, so there are 160, because the word is Petros.
Yes.
And so they get that right, Peter. There are 162 uses of the word Petros. I read them all. 161 of them, it's always translated Peter.
Okay.
Peter. And this one, King James leaves, which is translated us, or by interpretation, stone. That's probably a little more faithful how John was thinking of it because it says, which by interpretation, right?
Yes.
The reason it gets a little muxed here is because you have three languages going on. It's kind of cool. So Kephas is the Aramaic or the Hebrew.
Hebrew, yeah.
And what you're actually doing is it's called a transliteration. So when you hear a word in a foreign language and you try to spell it in yours, that's called a transliteration.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yep.
So the name Daniel is Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
God is my judge, which stands for me, right? So English is our way of saying Daniel in English, whereas the Hebrew would be like Daniel or Daniel or something like that. And we do this. Often we transliterate a word rather than translate it, right? So we have the word John, right? Name John, right? In French, it's Jacques. In Johann in German.
Yeah.
It's Juan in Spanish. It's so you have Juan, John, Jack, Jacques, Johann. I mean, there's right. Those are translations. But if you try to take a name without translating it and just try to say it in your syllables for your language, that's a transliteration.
Okay.
Right. So Kephas is really an Aramaic. It's a Greek attempt to pronounce the Aramaic word, which when you translate the word is Petros.
Yes.
Or Peter.
Yes.
So these are the reason it's sometimes gets that way is it's because John's gospel is universal. So he says this is how my ear would hear it for his Greek readers because they're reading along going Kephas. Oh, okay. And that's how they would hear it. He goes, but if you're translating it, this is what it would sound like. What I thought was fascinating was the meaning of this, right? This is the first time we hear his name goes from, and Jesus is the one, right? He's always been called Simon. Simon. And thereafter after it becomes Peter. 162 uses of the word Petros, and 161 are always translated Peter. Now, of the word Kephas, I'm going to keep trying to say it as it's supposed to be done, that word is only used 6 times.
Okay.
1 time is here. The other 5 are Paul talking about Peter.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So what I find interesting is that Paul's coming into the church. Now sometimes he refers to Peter as Petros, which is the translation. Yeah. But sometimes he steps back to the Aramaic like John did. Yeah. Because Saul, which we talked about, was raised Jewish. So this would be common for him. Yeah. Well, his name really is such and such. Kephas. So that's what his name really is. Okay, for you guys, you can call him Petros. You know, no. But what I found interesting was the ancestry of the words, what they mean. And I want to come back to that. I want to read John 21 at the end. So when Jesus first meets Peter, he says, "Thou art called Simon the son of John. You will be called Kephas," which is by interpretation a stone, or Petros. Right. Now, the last time Jesus addresses Peter that we know of by name, I'm not saying it doesn't happen after this, but the last time we have in Scripture, this is after the resurrection.
Okay.
This is John 21. They're out fishing.
Yes.
And he has a conversation. So let's go through and read verses 15 through 18 and see what happens. You're going to know it. Everybody's going to recognize this. But I want to see, how does Jesus address Peter?
Okay. So we're in John 21, verse 15. Mm-hmm. When they'd eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him. "You know that I love you. Feed my lambs," he told him. A second time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you. Shepherd my sheep," he told him. He asked him this third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved that he'd asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep." Continue.
18.
Truly I tell you, when you were younger, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will tie you and carry you where you don't want to go.
All right. Did you notice how Jesus addressed him?
Yeah.
It's a long, formal title.
Correct.
And it occurs at the beginning of John and at the end of John. How does he do it?
Well, he says Simon Peter, Simon, son of John.
Well, he doesn't call him Simon Peter. He says that's John's right?
Simon, son of John.
Simon, son of John.
Yeah.
Simon, son of John. Now, what he
All
doesn't...
3 times.
That's exactly right. What he doesn't call him is what?
Peter.
Exactly. Now, the reason I was like, I never noticed this. When he starts off, he calls him, Simon, you know what? I'm going to call you Petros, right?
Yep.
I'll use the Greek, right? Instead of the Kephas, the Aramaic. But at the end, he says, Simon. He comes back to his written name. Now, the reason I was like, oh, that seems interesting,
Yeah.
right? And then I did a little digging, and I always heard as sermons, people was like, oh, Peter, that's just the name, means like a little pebble. That's actually not true. And I did a study on that, and we had it in a video. No, I did it in a sermon.
Okay.
I talked about names and rocks.
Yes,
There's multiple names for words for rock. And actually the name Petros is actually a pretty significant rock. And here's where I want to point you out. Right, let's go back to it. So in the Thayer's lexicon and in the Strong's Concordance, you can look it up. You can look it up online. I'll put a link down to that. Or you can look it up if you have the original hardcover paper one. I have several of those. You'll notice it mentions that Petros is an appellation or a proper name signifying a stone, a rock, a ledge.
Okay.
It's a big rock. It's actually. But here's the interesting thing. This word was used to describe long before Peter was even born. Sophocles, an old Greek playwright,
right.
and Euripides, another Greek playwright, they use this word, and they would use it metaphorically if they were talking about a person. And they would use it metaphorically to describe somebody whose soul was hard and unyielding. So this name had been in use, Petros, as a not so nice nickname for somebody who was what we would call a Scrooge.
Yeah, okay.
For several hundred years before Peter even comes on the scene.
Okay.
So for several hundred years, various playwrights, this name, Sophocles and everybody, we have the various things. Again, you can look them up. It tells the manuscripts, and even the story of talking about Hercules and stuff like this. So it's been used for, again, a long time before Peter was even born. So I find it fascinating. The first thing out of Jesus' mouth means, you know what? You're like a ledge, stone, hard, unyielding. And this becomes, oh, that's Peter, Petros, right? Maybe he thought it was a bit of pride.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is at the end, notice what Jesus does. He doesn't call him Peter. He says, Simon, son of John. Same as he did.
Yep.
But the closing thing, when you were younger and you wouldn't want to go and you said, I'm not going to go where I want to, that's what you used to do. You were hard and unyielding. But in the future, you're going to go where you may not want to. And you're going to yield up your life. And the church has passed down. As Adventists, we have the Ellen White says this is him foretelling. And then we've gotten that from the patristic fathers who, Peter, in fact, John leaves the comment, this he said, signifying what death he'll die. Jesus tells him his future and says, this is going to be your future. And Peter yields to
that. Wow.
And so the name, he drops off the unyielding part of his name, the stubborn, the mule-headed. This is what we would say. I mean, Petros would be like a mule-headed, you're stubborn-headed. And Jesus drops that off and says, I don't see you that way anymore. This is your future. And to me, I was like, wow, I never saw that before. Because I didn't know some of the history with Sophocles and some of the other writers. I'm like, wow.
What's interesting, you're talking about just a second ago, you said that you'll go where you may not want to go. I was thinking about the story of Cornelius.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's,
yeah, that's true.
And he struggles to go there.
Yeah, he's on the roof, he has a vision, and he's like, okay, you need to go see. He's like, what? He has to have it 3 times, he goes, oh, and then he goes, and that's when it dawns.
But it's dropping off that unyielding part. I love that. Yeah.
So that was kind of the new start. Peter gets a new start, and it would have been subtly done, and I think John got it, because John's listening, obviously. And I don't know if Peter got it right away, but I think it's important. He comes back to, you're son of John.
Yeah.
He goes back to your lineage. When I met you, this is who you are.
Right.
And I gave you this nickname, knowing what was coming up. And that's not who you are anymore.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was kind of cool.
Well, I think that the yielding part to do this whole thing, he's trying to answer Jesus' question, but Jesus is trying to remind him of
his roots.
His roots, yeah.
And he's like, he's so sad. And his only conclusion is, Lord, you know everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, that's what I was waiting for. You're absolutely correct. And I'm going to tell you about your future.
You know, many times you may feel like that you want to get away from your past. You want to get away from things, but it's our roots. And at the base of those roots, we feel that it's Jesus Christ.
Yep.
You know, and He's the one that grows us. We go through things and nicknames.
Yep.
And then He reminds us of our roots, of who we belong to, who we are.
Yep.
And I love that He brought us tonight. And for us, this is probably one thing is to know that we're going to have to yield to Jesus.
Yep.
You know, yield to His leading. So, hey, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you once again next week.
Yeah.
Right back here together. If you want to get in touch with us, principal at MontereyBayAcademy.org or dgregory@MontereyBayAcademy.org. We'd love to hear from you. If there's an idea or thought that you've been kind of wondering about, or maybe saw something you wanted a little more clarity on, please shout out at us and let us know that. And we'd love to connect. And we enjoy doing this and we enjoy seeing you. So until next week, we'll see you later. Bye.